Matt, really interesting fight at welterweight, and we have Bryan Barberena coming in, taking on Aquaman, Anthony Ivy. I'm really looking forward to this one, and a lot of people might not be overly familiar with the man to our right, Anthony Ivy, coming out here for his second time in the octagon in 2020, and he's taken on a battle-tested Bryan Barberena. This is a guy that's fought Rude Boy Randy Brown and Vicente Luque in his last two fights. Kind of crazy to think about that. But if you're not overly familiar with Anthony Ivy, we profiled him quite a bit ahead of his fight with Christian Aguilera. So I'm going to throw it back to that, and we'll have a look at Anthony Ivy's road to the octagon. And he's going to be taking on a very tough test in Aquaman Anthony Ivy, 8-2 so far in his young career. He's the Fury FC welterweight champ. A lot of people might recognize the Truth, Mike Jackson from Fury FC, also the WXC welterweight champ. So he has experience training for 5-round fights. He was actually supposed to take on short notice, Gerald Meerschaert last weekend at UFC 250 when Ian Heinisch, was he in, was he out? He was in limbo. Ivy was going to step in, fight at 185 pounds. Now we get him back at 170, taking on Christian Aguilera. Matt, what do you make of this fight? I think it's a great one because Aguilera is a fast starter, 10 wins by knockout, 9 of them in the first round. Anthony Ivy, very well-rounded. He can get it done on the ground. He could knock you out on the feet. All right, Matt, so we really pumped the tires of Anthony Ivy, and to give it away, we picked Ivy to beat Aguilera. Spoiler alert, he lost that fight in 59 seconds and got knocked out. Did not look all that great. A guy that trains out of a decent gym where we've seen more and more guys coming out of that Texas area. You saw Ray Rodriguez coming out of there this past weekend. Yeah, it didn't work out for him against Kelleher, but an underrated gym and guys training out of that San Antonio type of area. For Bryan Barberena, he's coming at us from Gym O. And if you don't know Gym O, like, you're going to hear about it. I know Fortis MMA for a long time on the underground. Now Fortis is what it is. And then you've got City Kickboxing in New Zealand. But Jim O, John Salter, you've got Joe Selecki, Impa Kasanganai making a pretty big impact, and Bryan Barberena as well over on the East Coast. And slowly, all of a sudden, you've got some really good strikers, some really good grapplers, and it's just iron sharpening iron. The one thing I worry about with Bryan Barberena, and I have to pick up the mic to say this, and then I'll turn it down. Bryan Barberena is coming back from surgery on Bryan Barberena's back. And Matt, in terms of this injury, if you had to do your best Mike Tyson impression, what could you say about it?
I broke my back. Spinal.
And Bryan Barberena is getting back from spinal surgery.
What portion? Spinal.
Are owed to Mike Tyson. Now, it's always tough when you see that happening to a fighter, and he's been off for over a year since he had that fight against Randy Brown. So it'll be interesting to see what we get in this fight. But if we assume that Bryan Barberena took all that time off and he's going to be 100% healthy in this one, how do you think he matches up against Anthony Ivy?
Extremely well. And it's nothing against Anthony Ivy. It's more to do with the level of competition that Bryan Barberena's had to fight during his UFC tenure. Because Bryan Barberena, a lot of people forget, before his last fight, walked out to Baby Shark, do. And that's pretty cool to be Bryan Bam Barberena and walk out to that. His explanation was, my kids really like that song, so I thought it'd be cool if they saw me on TV walking out to it. And he's one of these guys, he has a phenomenal chin. I know he got TKO'd in his last two fights, but when you actually go back and watch those fights, he can take a tremendous amount of punishment. And it was really weird too, because I felt like after the Luque loss, yes, he lost to Luque, but it was a fight of the year contender against one of the more dangerous guys at welterweight that Barberena was able to drop and have a lot of success against him. But then he followed that up with a Randy Brown performance, and that was one of the worst versions of Bryan Barberena that we've seen, because Barberena's a guy, he's fought Leon Edwards, he's fought Vicente Luque, he's fought Randy Brown, he's fought a lot of guys better than Anthony Ivy. The problem is, though, we don't ever know which version of Bryan Barberena goes out there. The best version of Bryan Barberena is the one that probably isn't going to get him up the ranking very far, and it's that brawler style. When he really commits to that, marching forward, really throwing those big, heavy hooks to the body, going up top, mixing everything up, he's at his best. That's what we saw in the Luque fight. He's got really good boxing, he's a really durable guy. But against guys who make him at least a little concerned about the takedown, again, Leon Edwards is really able to do that well. He actually dropped Edwards with an uppercut in their fight, but Edwards, he's really good at, okay, if we're in striking, I can take you down. If you're really good at grappling, I can force the fight on its feet. And Randy Brown really has not that high level of skill set like a Leon Edwards, of course, but he's got that wrestling defense or the wrestling offense that you've always got to really be worried about. And Randy Brown really good at those big long front kicks, and that gave Barberena a problem because he was never able to really close that range and let off some of his boxing. I don't think Anthony Ivy has a lot of those tools, kind of the long range probing tools, if you will, that some of those other fighters have had. And I don't think he's going to be able to switch it up and really threaten the takedown all that much on Bryan Barberena, because Barberena, if he gets taken down, he's kind of got the Dustin Poirier effect where, oh, I'm just going to jump guillotine, or I'm going to try to jump on a submission instead of defending the takedown, which is a bit of a double-edged sword because, yes, if he gets it, it's great. But if not, then you're just on your back with a really dangerous guy on top of you. So there's a path to victory for Anthony Ivy. But the problem is Barberena's been in there with a guy who probably should be fighting for the title, a guy who's only lost welterweight in the last 5 years with Wonder Boy, and then Randy Brown, who I think we can all agree, yes, he doesn't have a number next to his name, and he's not one of the best welterweights in the world, but he's a guy who's just outside of that top 15 and can put on an entertaining fight with anyone. So I think Bryan Barberena, no matter what the opponent is, he's always going to give them a really hard fight, and I just think it's slightly too hard of a fight for Anthony Ivy.
And you bring up a really good point, because if Anthony Ivy's going to get the win in this one, take the fight to the ground. I mean, we know how good he can be from top position. Anthony Ivy, if you go back and watch some of the work he was able to do on the regional scene to get a shot in the UFC, albeit in these crazy times, but hey, if you get it, take it. And you know what he can do, where he's had those championship accomplishments on the regional scene. He's as credentialed as a guy as you're going to find entering the UFC at 170, unless it's a total anomaly. So I'm really looking forward to it. There's a path to victory for Anthony Ivy, as you had mentioned. The interesting thing, though, if you look at the predictions over in Tapology, out of 486 votes, 81% going Barberena, 71% picking to win by knockout. If you look over at the odds, Anthony Ivy, the underdog, opened as a plus 190. Quite a bit of money coming in quick and early on Barberena, and Ivy now sitting at a plus 215 or thereabouts. If you look over on the opposite side, for a really tough out, like you said, in Bryan Barberena, he's sitting around a minus 270, opened as a minus 225. Now, I struggle with that, but I will not struggle with this. I'm going to be picking Bryan Barberena to get the win. I think if he goes in there, again, I'm sure Anthony Ivy's learned from that Christian Aguilera fight, and he's not going to want to have a performance like that. But Bryan Barberena is going to want to have a performance like Christian Aguilera did. I think that we're more often than not going to see that out of Barberena. The brawling style plays into this one quite well, and I think you're going to see Bryan Barberena walking away with a win.
Yeah, man, Barberena is one of those guys. He could fight Wonderboy he could beat Wonderboy by decision or lose to Nico Price by knockout. Like, you never really know what you're going to get from him because you know exactly what you're going to get from him. He's just going to march forward. He's got a really tough style. And he's going to offer most people a big problem. And for Anthony Ivy, it's your second fight in the UFC. Like, this is a really tough pull for him. It's not going to be an easy one. Ivy, like we had said, has a path to victory, but no, Bryan Barberena should be able to win this, kind of get back on track. And again, Nico Price, the name that I threw out there on purpose, maybe a Mike Perry. I want to see Bryan Barberena in those just really exciting fights outside of the top 15.
Nick Diaz, Bryan Barberena. Will it happen? Who knows?
Probably
But I'm really looking forward to this one, Matt. We're both going with Bryan Barberena to get the win. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We got an extended look at our main event between Michelle Waterson and Angela Hill, and all the other great fights on this card. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say, let's get into it.